So, you wish to be part of our sisterhood? Yes, Abidemi replied immediately. Very well. But first, you must prove your loyalty and dedication to our society. You must make an ultimate sacrifice. Abidemi's jaw dropped in shock. She couldn't believe what she just heard. Mommy Tope, you should have explained this well for me, nah. She glanced around the room, searching for a way out, but the stern faces of the other women left her hopeless. Once upon a time, in the bustling city of Lagos, there lived a beautiful young woman named Abidemi. Abidemi was a beautiful African woman, known for her grace and elegance. She had caught the eyes of many suitors, but it was her husband Akin who had won her heart. Akin was a kind and dedicated man who loved Abidemi with all his heart. They had been married for 5 years, and their love only seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Abidemi had always admired some powerful women she saw at events. She's drawn to their confidence, their ability to spend extravagantly, and their glamorous appearance. Abidemi's interest in the powerful women's group only grew stronger as she saw her friend, Mommy Tope, who was a widow, rise in status and influence. She was envious of the luxurious lifestyle her friend now had and the admiration she received from others. Envious and desperate to be part of it, Abidemi begged Mommy Tope to introduce her to the group. After numerous pleas, Mommy Tope finally agreed to introduce her to the group, but her friend warned her to be careful and think through her decision before joining. Abidemi's curiosity was more determined than ever to join the group. She told her friend that she was ready to do whatever it takes to belong. A few days later, Abidemi received an invitation to a private meeting with members of the society. She was beyond excited and quickly made her way to the designated location, a secluded mansion on the outskirts of town. As she entered the mansion, she was greeted by a group of women dressed in black with bare heads. Abidemi felt a chill run down her spine, but she pushed her fear aside and greeted them with a confident smile. The leader of the group, an elderly woman who was rumored to be over 100 years old, sat on a throne-like chair in the center of the room. She looked Abidemi up and down before speaking. "So, you wish to be part of our sisterhood?" she asked. Her voice was stern and commanding. "Yes," Abidemi replied immediately, not wanting to appear hesitant. The leader nodded. "Very well. But first, you must prove your loyalty and dedication to our society." Abidemi's heart skipped a beat. She was ready for anything, or so she thought. "You must make an ultimate sacrifice," the leader continued. "You must kill your own husband in front of us as a symbol of leaving your old life behind and fully committing to our sisterhood." Abidemi's jaw dropped in shock. She couldn't believe what she just heard. She had always dreamed of living a luxurious life, but she never thought she would have to take a life to achieve it. She hesitated, but the leader's stern gaze left her breathless. Abidemi's mind raced as she struggled with the weight of the leader's demand. The thought of betraying Akin, the man she loved, filled her with dread and guilt. She glanced around the room, searching for a way out, but the stern faces of the other women left her hopeless. She turned to Mommy Tope and said to her, Mommy Tope, you should have explained this well for me, nah." Mommy Tope's face remained stern and rigid, unable to look her in the face. Torn between her desire for a lavish lifestyle and her love for her king, Abidemi felt trapped. She knew she couldn't go through with it. Abidemi stood tall and faced the leader. "I am sorry, but I cannot do this," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. The room fell silent as the leader's expression hardened. "You dare defy us," she growled. "You don't have much option here, young woman. You either go through with it or you die, because you have known a lot about us," she thundered. Abidemi pleaded with them to give her another option, but was told that that was the ultimate sacrifice that all of them underwent. "Ah!" she exclaimed. "Mommy Tope, so you were the one that killed your husband." Abidemi realized she was truly at a crossroads. With a heavy heart and a sense of resignation, Abidemi reluctantly agreed to carry out the unthinkable sacrifice demanded by the group. As she made her decision, a wave of guilt washed over her, mingling with fear and uncertainty that grieved her soul. She knew that once she crossed this line, there would be no turning back. As the woman leader chanted incantations, invoking the spirit of Abidemi's husband, a sense of dread settled upon her like a heavy shroud. Suddenly, Abidemi's husband, Akin, appeared in the mirror. A sense of dread washed over Abidemi as a knife was handed over to her. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with anticipation. With a trembling hand, Abidemi gripped the knife handed to her, its cold metal sending shivers down her spine. She approached the mirror, where the ethereal image of her husband had materialized, his feature distorted and otherworldly. As the woman leader urged her forward, Abidemi's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing within her soul. With a mix of fear and anguish, she raised the knife, her hand shaking uncontrollably. In that moment, as her gaze met on her lovely husband Akin, "I am sorry, Akin." Tears streaming down her cheeks, Abidemi cried out in anguish, her voice echoing through the room as she shattered the mirror with the knife. The sound of the splintering glasses seemed to reverberate with her pain and regret, each shard reflecting the shattered pieces of her soul. As the shattered pieces of the mirror lay scattered across the floor, silence enveloped the room. But then, unexpectedly, laughter began to bubble up from the other women in the room. At first, Abidemi was taken aback by the sudden shift in atmosphere. She looked around, confusion etched on her tear-streaked face. The women's laughter grew louder as they welcomed Abidemi to their sisterhood, their voice tinged with a sense of relief and joy. Her heart pounding in her chest, Abidemi rushed home, her footsteps echoing through the empty streets as she raced to reach her lovely husband Akin. But as she burst through the door of their home, her worst fear were realized. There, laying lifeless on the floor of the living room, was Akin, his peaceful expression frozen in death. Abidemi's words shattered around her as she collapsed on her knees, tears streaming down her cheeks in an endless torrent of grief and despair. The weight of her decision, the consequences of her choices, crashed down upon her with merciless forces, leaving her utterly broken and bereaved. She cried and cried and cried until there were no tears left to shed, her heart aching with a pain that seemed to consume her from within. After all the funeral rites of Akin was completed, Abidemi's life was changed drastically. With money flowing in like water, Abidemi embraced her newfound affluence with a mixture of disbelief and resignation. She replaced her mother's car with a sleek luxury vehicle, traded their humble home for a massive mansion, and indulged in all kinds of extravagant lifestyles. As Abidemi and her sisterhood arrived at each event in a dazzling display of opulence, heads turned and whispered followed in their wake. Their flashy cars, adorned with the latest accessories, signaled their arrival in styles, commanding attention and admiration from all who beheld them. With an air of effortless glamour, Abidemi and her companions stepped out of their luxurious vehicles. They were the epitome of sophistication and wealth, their every move calculated to captivate. Abidemi's sisterhood had become like family to her. They all shared the same lavish lifestyles, and they were always there to support and celebrate each other's success. They would often throw extravagant parties and events where they would be the center of attention, with people admiring their wealth and status. At these events, Abidemi and her sisterhood sisters would be seen spraying money on anyone and everyone, making it rain on the dance floor. They would also have the most lavish spread of food and drinks at their tables, with tasty edibles that were the envy of everyone around. But behind all the glitz and glamour, there was a sense of emptiness that Abidemi couldn't shake off. She knew that this lifestyle was all just a facade, a way to show off their wealth and power. In reality, they were just lonely individuals who craved attention and validation. After all the extravagant parties and events, Abidemi and her sisterhood sisters would go home alone and sad. They had no one to share their true feelings with, no one to confide in. Abidemi couldn't help but feel guilty for what she had become. She had abandoned her morals and values for the sake of money and power. She no longer recognized the person she had become, and it weighed heavily on her. One night, as Abidemi lay asleep in her luxurious bed, enveloped in the comfort of her opulent surroundings, she found herself consumed by a dream unlike any she had experienced before. In her dreams, she found herself in a thick forest, and a sight that left her breathless. She saw the ghostly figure of her husband Akin standing before her, his presence casting a shadow over her. Her heart pounding in her chest, Abidemi gazed upon Akin's spectral form, her breath catching in her throat as she beheld the blood-stained clothes he wore, with tears streaming down his face. Unable to tear her eyes away, Abidemi felt a wave of remorse wash over her, her conscience pricked by the sight of her husband's ghostly image. With trembling hands, Abidemi reached out to Akin, her voice choked with sorrow as she begged for his forgiveness. But the ghostly figure remained silent, his gaze piercing her soul with a haunting intensity that filled her with a deep sense of shame and regret. As the dream faded and Abidemi woke up, drenched in sweat, she found herself shaken to the core by the visitation she had experienced. In the cold light of day, the memory of her dream lingered like a dark cloud, a stark reminder of the consequences of her choices and the weight of her guilt. As Abidemi sat alone in the quiet of her dining room, the weight of her guilt heavy upon her shoulders, she suddenly felt a chill settle over the room. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she looked up from her breakfast, only to find the ghostly figure of her husband standing before her. Abidemi's heart leaped into her throat as she scrambled to her feet, her chair clattering to the floor in her haste to escape the spectral presence at her side. Panic seized her senses as she turned and fled, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls of her mansion as she ran, driven by fear and desperation. Fear gripped Abidemi as she ran into her room. "Why?" the voice cried out, sending shivers down Abidemi's spine. She dared not look back, for fear of what she might see, but the accusing tone of the voice filled her with a sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm her. With trembling hands, Abidemi reached the door, her only thought to escape the terrifying apparition that pursued her. But as she flung open the door and stumbled out into the cold night air, her heart froze in her chest at the sight that greeted her. There, standing before her, was the ghost of her husband, his spectral form illuminated by the pale moonlight, his eyes burning with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Frozen in terror, Abidemi could only watch in horror as the ghostly figure moved closer, its silent accusation hanging heavy in the air. With a strangled cry, Abidemi turned and fled back into the darkness of the mansion, her heart pounding with fear as she sought refuge from the ghostly presence that haunted her every step. But no matter how fast she ran, no matter how far she fled, she could not escape the relentless pursuit of her own guilt and remorse. As everywhere seemed to be quiet, Abidemi took her car keys and dashed out of her house, driving as fast as she could to her friend's house, Momitokpe. As Abidemi arrived at her friend's house, her heart pounding with fear, she was greeted by a scene of chaos. Momitokpe, her friend who had introduced her to the sisterhood, appeared scattered and scared, her eyes wide with terror as she ran helter-skelter, pursued by the ghostly figure of her own husband. Shock and disbelief washed over Abidemi as she watched the unusual show unfold before her eyes. It was as if the ghosts of their past had come back to haunt them, their presence a chilling reminder of the sin they could no longer outrun. With a sense of urgency, Abidemi rushed to Momitokpe's side, her own fear momentarily forgotten as she reached out to her friend in a desperate attempt to offer comfort and support. Together, they huddled together, seeking solace in each other's presence. As Abidemi and Momitokpe rushed to their Mother General's chambers, their hearts heavy with fear and confusion, they were met with a scene of utter devastation. The room lay in disarray, its once orderly surroundings now in chaos, and at the center of it all lay their Mother General, lifeless and still. Shocked and disbelief washed over Abidemi and Momitokpe as they took in the sights before them. Their mentor, the woman who had guided them into the sisterhood, now lay dead before their eyes, her presence a solemn reminder of the gravity of the situation. But what chilled them to the bone was the sight of the shattered pot, the vessel that had held the souls of their husbands in bondage. Its broken shards lay scattered across the floor, a silent testament to the power that had been unleashed upon their once secretive sisterhood. As they looked around the room, Abidemi and Momitokpe saw their fellow cult members gathered in a circle, their faces etched with fear and confusion. It was clear that they too had been affected by the events that had transpired, their once unshakable confidence shaken by the sudden turns of events. In that moment of chaos and uncertainty, Abidemi and Momitokpe realized that the time for reckoning had come. As they stood in confusion, a loud scream pierced the air. Abidemi and Momitokpe jumped in fear as they watched in horror as one of their fellow cult members shouted in agony. A swing of an unseen cane could be heard in the air, leaving marks upon their skin. Panic erupted among the group as the invisible force continued to lash out. Their screams mingled with the sound of the unseen cane as it continued to wipe through the air, striking them with merciless precision. In their terror, they fled in all directions, desperate to escape the relentless onslaught. As the members of the sisterhood gathered in the village square, their bodies bruised and battered from the unseen cane, a heavy silence descended upon them. The weight of their sins hung heavy in the air. Their guilt and shame lay bare for all to see. With tears streaming down their faces, Abidemi, Mommy Tope, and the other court members confessed to the atrocity they had committed in their pursuit of wealth and power. They spoke of how they had betrayed their husbands, the men they had once loved, and had transpired to take their lives in exchange for material gain. Their words were met with gasps of horror and disbelief from the gathered crowd, who listened in stunned silence as the truth of their crimes was laid bare. It was a moment of reckoning, a collective confession of sins that had stained their souls and brought devastation upon their lives. The weight of their guilt lifted from their shoulders, replaced by a sense of remorse and regret for the lives they had taken and the pain they had caused. As the women sought forgiveness in the village square, a sudden darkness descended, casting a shadow over the gathering. A deafening lightning filled the air. Ominous rumble of thunder could be heard in the distance. The villagers watched in horror as the lightning struck each woman in turn, leaving them lifeless on the ground. The villagers fled in all directions, seeking refuge from the wrath of the heavens above. In the aftermath of the lightning strike, the square lay silent, the lifeless bodies of the women serving as a grim reminder of the consequences of their sins. And though the villagers had fled in terror, the memory of the fateful day would linger on. In the aftermath of the tragic events, the lifeless bodies of the women, their souls claimed by the wrath of the storm, were carried to the edge of the evil forest. There, amidst the dark and forbidding tree, a makeshift grave was prepared, a final resting place for those whose lives had been consumed by darkness. This story teaches us that comparing oneself to others and converting their material possessions or lifestyle can lead to discontentment and misguided actions. It's important to appreciate what one has and focus on personal growth and fulfillment rather than chasing after an illusion of happiness based on external appearances. It also serves as a stark reminder that true contentment and fulfillment comes from within, not from material wealth or status, and that the pursuit of wealth and power at any cost can lead to tragic consequences. Thank you so much for watching. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do. Like and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss out on any of our amazing stories. Bye.